You're parked on a freezing night, engine off, watching your own breath fog up the windshield, wondering how on earth anyone survives out here without burning gas until the tank runs dry. I used to wonder the exact same thing. Then I learned the truth. A single candle that costs about $1 can keep the inside of a car warm enough to get you through a night that would otherwise land you in a hospital bed. That is not a guess, and it is not a gimmick. It is an old survival trick that quiet, careful people have leaned on for almost 100 years, and it got buried because nobody earns a dime when you keep yourself warm for $1. I found it spelled out plainly in a cold weather survival guide put out by the state of Minnesota, and after I tested it in my own driveway one January night, I never looked at my car heater the same way again. And here is the part that matters most to you. This works in the car you already own, with the wallet you already have, starting tonight. Now let me back up and tell you how I got here, because I did not always know this. For most of my life, I was the man idling in the parking lot. If it was cold, I ran the engine. If I was waiting to pick someone up, I ran the engine. I thought that was just what you did. I thought heat came from gasoline and a running motor, and any other idea was for people who could not afford a full tank. I remember one winter evening, sitting outside a pharmacy while my wife ran in for her prescription, and I kept that engine humming for 25 minutes just to keep my hands warm. I never once asked myself what that was costing me. I never asked what it was costing my lungs. I just did what everybody around me did because it felt normal, and normal felt safe. But normal was quietly draining me, and I did not find out until I started keeping track. Here is the number that stopped me cold. A typical car engine, just sitting there idling and doing nothing but keeping you warm, burns somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 gallon of gasoline every single hour. Think about that. You are not going anywhere. You are not covering a single mile. You are simply parked, and you are pouring fuel into the air. On a bitter night, if you idle for 8 hours to stay warm, you can burn through 2 to 4 gallons of gas doing absolutely nothing. At today's prices, that is easily $10 to $14 a night, gone, turned into nothing but exhaust and noise. Do that through a long, cold stretch, a few dozen nights a winter, and you have quietly handed over hundreds of dollars for heat you could have gotten another way. I ran those numbers at my own kitchen table, and I felt a little sick, because I had been doing it for decades and calling it common sense, and that was only the money. The part that truly rattled me came later, and it is the reason I take this so seriously now. When you sit in a parked car with the engine running, you are gambling with something far more precious than gasoline. You are gambling with the air you breathe. Every running engine produces carbon monoxide, a gas you cannot see, cannot smell, and cannot taste. On an ordinary day, it goes out the tailpipe and disappears. But on a snowy night, when the snow drifts up around your bumper, that tailpipe can get blocked, and the carbon monoxide has nowhere to go but up, under the car, and into the cabin with you. And because you cannot smell it, you do not fight it. You just get sleepy. You get warm and drowsy and comfortable, and you drift off. And for hundreds of people every single winter in this country, that is the last thing that ever happens to them. Public health records show that carbon monoxide poisoning kills more than 400 Americans a year and sends tens of thousands more to the emergency room, and a heartbreaking share of those cases involve a car running in a driveway, a garage, or a snowbank. So here is the quiet betrayal I want you to sit with for a moment. For years I believed the only way to stay warm in a cold car was the most expensive way and the most dangerous way at the same time. And I never questioned it, because questioning it never occurred to me. Who benefits when you believe that heat must come from a running motor? The people who sell you the gasoline, the people who sell you the running motor. An entire way of life built on the idea that comfort is something you buy by the gallon, over and over, every cold night of your life. I am not telling you there is a cartoon villain in a back room twisting his mustache. I am telling you something quieter and more honest. Nobody ever had a reason to teach you the cheap way, because there is no profit in the cheap way. And so the cheap way got forgotten, and the expensive way got called normal. But the cheap way was never actually lost. It was just kept alive by people who had no choice but to remember it. And that is where this story really begins. Because to understand the dollar trick, you have to meet the people who invented it. And they were not scientists in a lab. They were survivors. Go back with me to the 1930s, to the deepest years of the Great Depression. Millions of Americans were on the move, riding the rails, sleeping rough, drifting from town to town, looking for any kind of work. These were the people the newspapers called hobos and tramps and drifters, but a great many of them were ordinary fathers and sons who had simply run out of luck. They had almost nothing, and when you have almost nothing, you cannot afford to waste anything, especially not heat. So these travelers developed a whole quiet science of keeping warm on pennies, and one of their most reliable tools was a tiny homemade heater made from a tin can and a stub of wax. Around campfires and in the scouting handbooks of that era, it earned a name that has stuck for generations. They called it the buddy burner. The buddy burner was beautifully simple, and I want you to picture it because it explains everything about why the modern dollar trick works. You take an empty tuna can or cat food can, something short and wide. You roll up a strip of corrugated cardboard, the kind with the wavy ridges inside, and you coil it tightly into the can so it stands up like a little spiral. Then you melt old candle stubs or a chunk of paraffin wax and pour it over the cardboard until it soaks in. What you have made is essentially a giant, slow, steady candle. The cardboard acts like a wick that never quite burns up, and the wax feeds a small, controlled flame for hours. Scouts used these to cook eggs on an overturned coffee can. Depression-era travelers used them to warm their hands and take the killing edge off a cold night. And here is the thing that ties it directly to your car. A small, contained flame like that gives off a remarkable amount of usable heat, and in an enclosed space, it adds up fast. Now, I was skeptical. I will be honest with you. When I first read about warming a car with a candle, my gut reaction was that it sounded like a fairy tale. A candle against a winter night? I figured a single little flame could not possibly do anything against all that cold steel and glass. So I did what I always tell you to do. I did not take anybody's word for it, including mine. I tested it. But before I tell you what happened in my driveway, you need one piece of science, because it is the piece that turns a fairy tale into a fact. A single burning candle is not a weak little thing. A common candle flame gives off roughly 70 to 80 watts of heat energy. Let that sink in. That is nearly the same amount of heat thrown off by one of the old-fashioned light bulbs that people use to warm baby chicks and keep pipes from freezing. Now, 70 or 80 watts would vanish instantly in your open living room. But the inside of a car is a tiny sealed box, only 40 or 50 cubic feet of air. Concentrate 70 or 80 watts of steady heat into a space that small, add your own body heat, which is another 100 watts all by itself, and something surprising happens. The temperature inside stops falling. It holds. And then, slowly, it begins to climb. This is exactly why the cold weather survival kit recommended by the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, in a state that knows real cold better than almost anywhere on this continent, has for years included a plain candle and a way to light it. Their own winter survival guidance tells stranded drivers to keep a candle in a can as a heat source and a light source, precisely because it can raise the temperature inside a stalled car by a meaningful amount without burning a drop of fuel and without filling the cabin with deadly exhaust. When I read that a state government, the same folks who put out the road maps and the driving manuals, were quietly telling people to carry a candle to survive the winter, I stopped thinking of this as a hobo trick and started thinking of it as buried common sense. So, on a night when my thermometer read about 18 degrees, I bundled up, went out to my car in the driveway, cracked one window just barely, maybe half an inch for fresh air, and I lit a single candle set safely down in an empty metal coffee can so nothing could tip it or touch the upholstery. Then I sat there with a cheap indoor thermometer on the dashboard, and I waited and I watched, and I did not believe it was going to do a thing. Within about 20 minutes, the reading on that thermometer had climbed more than 15 degrees. My fingers, which had been aching, went comfortable. The windshield, which had been fogging, actually started to clear right in front of the flame. I sat in that car for over an hour on the heat of $1 candle, warm enough to be genuinely comfortable, and the whole time my engine was stone cold and silent, and my gas tank was exactly as full as when I started. I remember laughing out loud, alone in my own car, because I had been fooled for so many years. I had burned hundreds of dollars of gasoline and risked my own lungs, and the answer had been sitting on the shelf at the dollar store the entire time. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You are thinking this is fine for someone with a garage full of camping gear, or someone young and healthy, or someone who has time to build little cans of cardboard and wax. You are thinking this is not really for you. Not with your budget, not with your setup, not tonight. So let me stop you right there, because I built this next part specifically for you, and I promise it asks for nothing you do not already have in your house this very minute. You do not need a buddy burner. You do not need to melt wax or roll cardboard or buy anything special. Walk into your kitchen. Almost every home in America has a few candles in a drawer somewhere, left over from a birthday, a power outage, or a holiday. You need one or two of those, and you need something that will not burn to set them in. An empty metal coffee can is perfect. A clean soup can works. Even a ceramic coffee mug or a small metal cake tin will do the job. That is it. That is the entire shopping list, and you already own all of it. Here is exactly how I want you to do it. And please listen closely to this part, because the safety is not optional. You set your candle down inside the metal can, so the flame is protected and the can catches any wax and stays cool at the bottom. You place that can somewhere solid and level, ideally on the floor of the car or on a metal surface, never on a seat, never on anything soft, never anywhere it can tip over. You keep it well away from anything that could catch, and you never, ever leave it burning while you sleep or while you step away. And this is the rule that matters more than all the others. You crack a window. Just a little, half an inch is plenty, enough to let a whisper of fresh air move through. A flame uses oxygen, and you always give it a source of fresh air, and in exchange it gives you heat you can trust, heat with no hidden exhaust sneaking up on you. Do it that way, and you have safe, steady, honest warmth for pennies an hour in the car sitting in your driveway right now, tonight, with nothing but what you already own. And let me push this even further into your everyday life, because this is not only about cars. That same principle, a small contained flame inside a small contained space, is exactly how people warmed themselves for centuries before any of us had a furnace with a monthly bill attached. In a small bedroom, a couple of candles safely set in the sink or in a metal roasting pan will take the raw bite out of the air. During a winter power outage, when the electricity is gone and the house is going cold and you are frightened, a few candles in metal cans, cracked window nearby, gathered in the smallest room of the house, can be the difference between a miserable night and a dangerous one. My own grandmother used to keep what she called a warming candle going in the coldest corner of her kitchen, and I thought it was just her being old-fashioned. It turns out she understood something I had to spend 50 years and a lot of wasted gasoline to relearn. That instinct of yours is worth trusting, and it is exactly what led me to put everything I know into writing. I have spent years collecting these forgotten methods, testing them and writing them down so they would not disappear again, and that work lives in my books. First Wins is where I start people off, the fastest and most useful rediscoveries gathered in one place. Deeper cuts goes further into the methods that took me longer to track down. And the full stack is everything, the complete collection for the person who wants it all in one place. You can find them linked in the description below, and I think you will recognize yourself on almost every page. But let me bring you back to where we were, because there is one final refinement, one last piece of the old knowledge that takes this from a good trick to a genuinely remarkable one, and I almost missed it entirely. I only found it because I kept digging, and it comes straight out of the way people heated rooms before central heating existed. This is the part I have been building toward, so stay with me, because this is the piece almost nobody talks about. The problem with a bare flame is that most of its heat rushes straight up and gets lost. The flame is hot, but that heat rides up in a thin column and pools uselessly at the roof of the car while your hands and feet stay cold. The old-timers understood this instinctively, and their fix was pure genius, and it costs you almost nothing. You take a clay flower pot, the plain terracotta kind you can buy at any garden shop for $1 or $2, or dig out of your own shed for free, and you turn it upside down and set it over the candle in the can, propped up on a couple of small stones or bolts so air can still reach the flame underneath. Here is what that clay does, and this is the secret finale I wanted to hand you. Instead of letting the heat shoot straight up and vanish, the clay soaks it in. That terracotta gets warm, then hot, and because clay holds heat the way a brick hearth does, it stops being a fleeting flame and becomes a steady, radiating warm object. It stores the heat and pushes it outward, low and even, right where your body is. The flame becomes a little radiator. You can hold your cold hands near that warm clay and feel the heat pouring off it long and steady instead of chasing a thin flame that warms nothing. I trace this idea back through old household manuals to the plain fact that this is simply how ceramic and masonry heating always worked. The great tile stoves of Northern Europe, the brick ovens our great-grandparents cooked in, the very hearthstones of old farmhouses, all of them worked on one principle. Fire heats a dense material. The material holds the heat, and the material gives it back slowly and gently for hours. A $1 clay pot over a $1 candle is that exact same ancient principle, shrunk down to fit in the footwell of your car. Poor travelers in the Depression knew the flame, but the ones who really knew how to survive knew to put something over that flame, to catch the heat and hold it. That is the difference between merely surviving a cold night and actually being warm through one, and it is the piece that got scrubbed out of modern life entirely, because there is not one thin dime of profit in a clay pot and a candle. Now I want to be square with you, because you are smart and you deserve straight talk. That clay pot does not create one bit more heat than the candle already makes. Anyone who tells you a flower pot magically multiplies energy is selling you moonshine, and I will not do that to you. What the clay does is far more useful and completely real. It captures the heat that was escaping and wasting, it stores it, and it hands it back to you low and slow and steady, right at body level, instead of letting it stream up and gather where it does you no good. It changes when and where the heat reaches you, and on a cold night, that is everything. That is the whole game. I tested this too, the pot over the can, and the difference was not subtle. The bare candle warmed the air near the ceiling first. The candle under the clay pot warmed the space around my hands and knees, the space that actually matters, and it kept a gentle warmth radiating even in the minutes after I finally pinched the flame out. The clay stayed warm and kept giving. So let me put the whole thing together for you, the complete forgotten method, the one I wish somebody had handed me 40 years ago. One candle, $1 or less, or a few you already have in a drawer. One metal can to hold it safe and level. One clay flower pot turned upside down over the top, propped on a couple of small stones so air can reach the flame, and one window cracked open half an inch for fresh air, always, without exception. That is the entire system. It costs you under $3 if you buy every piece brand new, and most likely it costs you nothing at all because you already own every part of it. It burns no gasoline. It risks no engine exhaust when you follow the fresh air rule. It runs for hours on the heat of a single small flame, and it will keep you warm on a night when the man in the next parking lot is burning a gallon of gas every 2 hours and slowly poisoning the air he breathes and calling it the only way. I think about the people who kept this alive, and it moves me more than I expected. The travelers of the 1930s who had nothing and made warmth out of a tuna can and a scrap of cardboard. The scouts who passed the buddy burner down from one generation to the next around a campfire. The state of Minnesota, quietly tucking a candle into an official survival list because their people die in the cold and they know what actually saves a life. All of them holding on to a truth that convenience culture was busy throwing away. They kept it safe through all those years so that it would still be here, waiting on the night you finally needed it. And now it is not lost anymore. Now it is yours. You can walk out to your kitchen drawer this weekend, pull out a candle, drop it in a coffee can, set a flower pot over it, crack a window, and prove every word of this to yourself in about 20 minutes, the same way I did, alone in my own driveway, laughing at how simple it turned out to be. Here is what I really want you to carry away from all of this, and it is not about candles at all. For most of my life, I let other people decide what my comfort had to cost, and I never once thought to question the price. I believed warmth came only from a running engine and a full tank, because that was the only story anybody ever bothered to tell me. And it was not true. It was never true. There was a quieter, older, gentler way waiting the whole time, and it had simply been allowed to fade, because a warm person who spent $1 is worth far less to somebody's ledger than a cold person who keeps paying and paying and paying. You are the kind of person who can feel when that is happening. You are the kind of person who suspects that a lot of useful, honest, life-saving knowledge got quietly set aside, not because it stopped working, but because somebody figured out how to sell you the expensive version instead. That instinct of yours is correct, and it is worth trusting. So let me ask you something directly, and I truly want your answer. Have you ever been the one sitting in a cold parked car with the engine running, watching the gas gauge and the fog on the glass, never once imagining that a $1 candle and a clay pot could have done the job better and safer? Tell me about it in the comments below. I read them, and I want to hear your story. So take 1 minute right now and leave a comment, because somebody scrolling past who is cold and worried tonight needs to hear that this is real and that it works. And if you are the kind of person who wants to recover the honest, forgotten know-how that convenience culture quietly took from all of us, then come join us and follow along, because we are a growing group of people digging these old methods back up one at a time. In the very next one, I am going to show you the forgotten way people kept an entire room warm through the night using nothing but a single clay brick and the last dying heat of a stove, a trick our great-grandparents swore by and almost nobody remembers today. Do not miss it. Stay warm, stay curious, and never again believe that comfort has to be something you buy by the gallon. That candle trick you just watched is only the beginning. Inside the Old Ways Society, I pick up right where this video stopped, walking you through the full method. Ask me your own questions there, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone either. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. It takes a minute, and you can cancel any time.